I share this office with my daughter. She has her own desk here, and her design work displayed. And yeah, I get to work from home, which is a great thing. I sit on the ball sometimes. I stand sometimes. You know, I try not to sit in the chair as much as possible. You know, usually I stand in the morning, you know, when I got a lot of energy, and in the afternoon I'll lower the desk. It's the coolest thing, right? It's like, yeah.
Oh, I just saw like a commercial for this.
Oh yeah? No, they're the best. I bought the base on Amazon, and then this is like a countertop from IKEA. So really, the whole thing didn't really cost, you know, that much. But yeah, it's a really cool thing to have. Yeah, I just got a brand new iMac. This guy's really powerful, and then so I use my old one as a second monitor, and you know, it's just great because if you're doing revisions or something, you can have the revisions over here, or I usually do like the file organization over here, so I can keep this one for mainly what I'm working on.
So, what is your name?
Patrick Moroney.
What is your job?
My job is a graphic designer.
Did you have any schooling or training?
I did, yeah. I went to the University of Cincinnati. Their school is Design, Architecture, and Planning. I graduated in 2001 with a degree in what they call Bachelor of Science in Design. I can talk a little bit about what that program is like if you want. Okay, so the first year of that program is actually a lot of basics. So it's we actually didn't use a computer the entire first year we were there. We were just drawing, doing still lifes, doing figure drawing, working with color. And they actually had they have these like chips, and you do compositions with color and learn about color theory and stuff like this, and also physical, creating sculpture. So it was very kind of artsy, first year. And then in the second year, they start getting a lot more into design theory and typography, and then sort of computers were secondary in a sense. We probably had one class per semester where we actually worked on the computer, but it was sort of a kind of an arts theory-based program. There were a couple guys there from Switzerland. It was kind of based in this sort of Swiss modernist graphic design type thing. And then the last 3 years, you sort of every other semester you did what they call a co-op. It's kind of like an internship, but it's paid. And so that gives you a chance to get out in the real world and go to I was in New York one semester. I was in Pittsburgh one semester. Worked for Christie's Auction House. A couple of different agencies. So it kind of gives you a taste of what the real world of graphic design is.
So what do you do in those internships you made? What do you do?
Yeah, a lot of I guess you could say grunt work, right? Because that's what they're going to do with the interns. Yeah. But so for example, when I was at Christie's, I actually got some of my own projects, like these little invitations for shows that were coming up or whatever, and they of course they have their own sort of aesthetic that's already established, so you're not reinventing the wheel and whatnot. And then other internships you'd be doing. Let's say there was a packaging firm that I worked for that it would just be like iterations of different packages. Okay, this one has the stripes going this way. This one has the stripes going that. It's like all this stuff, and then you would do mock-ups for their presentations. That kind of thing. So yeah, just a little bit of everything. Mm-hmm.
So you work from home, right? So,
mm-hmm.
Do you have to go places to make stuff, or you stay here?
Yeah, well, no, I don't. I don't really have to go anywhere to do work. but I do go to the city once in a while to meet with clients. It's pretty rare though, to be honest. I mean, it's probably once every other month or so that I actually have to leave the house, which is nice, obviously. But it's it's good being close enough to the city where I can do that. But 95% of the time I'm just doing everything from right here.
So can you explain what is graphic design as a whole?
Sure. I mean, it's a process of visualizing information and helping businesses to create promotional materials, informational materials, identities. So that's obviously logos and kind of giving them what you call a trade dress. This is what their colors are going to be, and this is what their what their fonts are going to be, and I don't know. I mean, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you said about that. So how do you what are your creative influences? How do you come up with your ideas?
Well, I mean, a lot of, obviously, now online there's a lot of places to go for inspiration if I'm, feeling not, particularly inspired. And also, just out in the world, you might come across something that you see that inspires an idea. That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure I have any more to say about that.
How do you make the designs that you make? On what platform?
Well, it depends on what the project is. So, for example, anything that has to do with layout or typography, I would do in Adobe InDesign. Okay, so this, an example, this is a project that I'm working on right now. It's an invitation for a bourbon and cheese tasting event, right? And I'll do a couple of options for them, and I'll do that in InDesign. And then InDesign is good for anything that is multiple pages, or that is heavily typography based, where you have where you have text flowing from one page to the other. And then Illustrator would be, for example, anything that is a graph or a chart or a map like you see here, right? Because it utilizes vector, right? So you can see and you could scale this to any size and it doesn't lose resolution. See that, how that's very smooth? So this is all vector art. And then what I would do is then I would place this into the other document. So I'll be placing that into this document, see here, in InDesign, right? And then lastly would be Photoshop, and let's just say, okay, so Photoshop is really for working with, photos, enhancing them, clipping them out of backgrounds, and then in this case, I'm applying a new label that I'm working on to, and I don't want to take credit for that design because it was sort of so I'm sort of I'm applying this design, curving it to the bottle to make it look like a real mock-up, right? And that's so, in Photoshop utilizes raster, right? So whereas Illustrator is vector, Photoshop is raster. You're dealing with pixels as opposed to lines, if that makes sense.
That's cool. So do you have a time limit for making stuff? What are your limitations?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, whenever I quote a job, I do my best to estimate how long I think it's going to take me, right? And then I multiply that times my hourly rate, and so then I try to hold myself to that, you know, and I keep really good track of my hours, and to make sure that I'm staying profitable, and if it's going over, I'll let the client know. Sometimes they'll give me some extra compensation. But I try to give a goal to myself and then stay within it.
So like, what is one of the biggest projects that you had to work on?
One of the biggest projects, let's see. Well, I mean, right now I do a lot of work for the ACLU, and they have, reports that are hundreds of pages long. Those, I guess physically speaking, those would be sort of like the biggest projects that I work on. They get pretty complex. I don't know if you meant like in terms of like notoriety or.
Well, yeah,
or
like I was gonna ask that next. Like, like the most, I don't know how to word it, like publicity and that.
Right. Okay, well, I mean, I've done some stuff for the New York Wine and Grape Foundation.
I saw that on your website.
What's that? Oh, you did? Okay. So these are like a selection of logos that I've done. This logo in particular, you if you drive through New York, you'll see it everywhere. It's Taste New York, and it was the governor, through a PR agency I know, commissioned that for like signage on roads. So if you're going down any of the big highways in New York, you'll see that they're trying to promote New York, based food and beverage. And then I also did this New York Wines logo for them, and then also this New York Drinks New York logo, which is not on here, but those are probably the ones that people see the most. And I guess the other one I would say is this Grow NYC logo. That's for the farmers markets. This one here in Manhattan, and that logo is all over the place at the various farmers markets.
So how do you publicize your, how do you get it out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's really, I'm lucky enough that it's word of mouth is where I'd say 95% of my business comes from, so I don't have to do very much of that. One thing that I do is I post on Craigslist, and I say, I mean, it's surprising, but you wouldn't believe, I've probably gotten 5 long-term clients from just posting on Craigslist.
Just have to put yourself out there, right?
You just got to put yourself out there, and you'd be surprised who looks through there and to try to find people.
And it's free, right?
It's free, exactly. It's kind of amazing.
So the governor was one of the biggest people that you had.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't even have contact with him directly.
Yeah,
this was sort of through a PR agency, but it was.
You can still make the connection.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm going to backtrack a little bit.
Sure.
When did you start getting into graphic design?
Well, I mean, if you're asking, as a kid, so the way I would answer that is I didn't know what graphic design was for a long time, and I had definitely shown signs of being interested in it. I mean, I remember as a kid, I would draw all the time, right? A lot of kids draw all the time, but I would also try to remember as many logos as I could, and draw the logos. I would try to draw interesting type typefaces or whatever, and interesting ways to do my name. And I remember having like collecting business cards all the time and like putting them in this album. Like I don't know if you ever seen like the old like picture albums or whatever, but I did one of like all business cards, and I was just like really interested in like the type and like how each one was different and what and unfortunately the guidance counselors and adults in my life didn't sort of like put the two and two together, and so I graduated high school really not knowing what I wanted to do. And so I was in a community college and sort of taking general classes, an associate's degree, and discovered that the University of Cincinnati, I was in Columbus, and Cincinnati's not far away, they actually had a very good design program. So once I discovered that, it was like, hey, this is a really good fit for me. So that's when I actually realized that design is, was an option. Yeah.
Okay. So, what do you suggest for kids that are interested in graphic design?
I would say, hone your drawing skills as much as possible, and also try to develop a personal style. And this is something that I probably never did enough of. I kind of like, pick a style kind of based on the project, but I think students and people that are coming into the workforce that have a strong personal style and aesthetic are going to do a little better, because they're going to stand out, and so I would say also read books on or online blogs or whatever on typography, on color theory, and just really immerse yourself. I mean, there's so much information now online that you can almost take like a first year of a graphic design, on just by educating yourself. Yeah, exactly. Reading blogs of really good designers, and getting inspired by them.
I think even this, it could teach them something. Right?
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. So, like, how do you learn how to use your editor, like the editing software?
I guess I probably learned the programs. I mean, I learned them at school, but then I also learned them by working with other people in the internships that I did. But that said, like there's hundreds of tutorials on how to use Photoshop, how to use Illustrator, how to use InDesign, and they're pretty easy. They're not like super complicated programs to use. So again, with what's out there on the internet, you could really teach yourself how to use them.
Can you like show us how like simply like how do you like, I don't know, like what's your style like?
She wants to see you do something on the computer, basically.
Like,
okay.
How do you do you have like a certain style that you go off of when you design?
Well, that's kind of what I was getting to earlier, is that, I don't have a particular, I mean, I guess you would say my style is sort of clean, aesthetic, for example, like, something like that. It's very modern, and it's very typical of, stuff that I do. Let's see, what was I just looking at? Oh, no, that's not it. Sorry. Sort of, but like, so I might pick up something like this. Like I saw these stock woodcut illustrations, and it inspired me to do kind of vintage, feel. So I found a font that goes with it, and I'm gonna try to sell them on this, this kind of like old timey, whatever.
So this is from scratch, or?
Yeah, that's from scratch, right? Exactly. I mean, I went, so I was like, looking around for inspiration, and I went to, Shutterstock, because this client has a Shutterstock subscription, and then I went in here and looked for bourbon illustrations, and saw what, or whiskey illustrations, and saw what came up, and found that and downloaded those. And then these are comps. Actually, I would actually need to have them purchase. These are free comps that we can't actually use until they're purchased. But I'm gonna sell the client on this concept. And then I would sort of like, so that like the color palette I took in InDesign, you could take this image here. This is the book cover. For the person that's going to be at this tasting, and then it'll create a color palette, right? Like, so like I created these color palettes just from this book cover, and then I was able to then apply the colors to the other, the type and the background and stuff, so it all kind of works together, Yeah, I mean, and I could sort of show you what I do with logos. Those are sort of a different animal, and with logos I do a lot of hand sketching, and I'll get in this closet here and pull some sketches out. I'll show you what I mean. Right, so like. So this was a logo for a company called Price Point, and so with them I got on the phone and did some brainstorming, and then went back and did just whatever, dozens and dozens of sketches, and I do them on tracing paper so that I can overlay and then redo it, but tweak it a little bit, do something slightly different with it, and then eventually you kind of take a break from it, and then come back in a couple days, and you see something you didn't see before, or you combine a couple of sketches, and it sparks an idea, and so that's kind of the process of the logos. And then so then after I have, let's say 5 or 6 good hand-drawn designs, then I'll actually take a photo of it and put it on the computer, and then refine it in the computer, and I would usually present it in black and white, and then I would work on color after they sort of approve the design, like do all kinds of color iterations,
So what was the finished product of this? Do you have it?
Is it Price Point? It's not on here. I believe it is on my website though. Or it's on here. I can just show you one here.
It's a cool process how you go from nothing to some intricate.
It is. So okay, so there's the final logo that we ended up with that.
Yeah, I can see how it went from that to that. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes this wasn't even in this design wasn't even the first presentation that I did for them. They sort of were sort of wishy-washy on the 3 options that I did present, and so I went back and I was I submitted a couple more that were sketches, and they kind of latched onto this idea, and so you never know what a client's going to go for, so it's good to have some stuff in your back pocket,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else I would like to say about just in general?
Work hard. If you're into it, I mean, it's a competitive field, you know, and working for yourself is amazing. You know, I mean, I like I said, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and I pick her up at school every day, you know, and I spend the afternoon with her, and you know, so many people don't get to do that. So if you can make your way, you know, I think it's hard to obviously start out freelancing, but if you have that, you know, in the back of your mind, and you know, you cut your chops in a design studio or two, and you know, try to get some clients on the side while you're doing that, and then, you know, then you could potentially make your break and work for yourself. It's the best. Yeah. You know, and a lot of when people go into graphic design, they do a lot of web, and there's, to be honest, that's probably where the most money is. It's just not, you know, I don't particularly, like, you know, keep up with all the technology, and, you know, so I'm happy doing what I'm doing, and I'm, you know, doing fine with this, so I haven't had to really get into web. But that's certainly, if that's your calling, I mean, that, you know, is definitely probably the most opportunities in web.
What was that type thing? The type, I forget what it was. It was like, you have to learn that, you're talking about it.
Typography?
Yeah, that.
Yeah, I mean, that is basically studying different, you know, typefaces or fonts and the history of them, right? Because, you know, every font that you see has, you know, evolved from some other font, and you know, it's a very interesting history, but it's, you know, it's something that every, you know, graphic designer should know, because at, you know, at the end of the day, like, there's your basics, you know. I mean, most of the typefaces out there are bad, right? And you have to, designer, you have to be able to know what a good, you know, typeface is. I mean, go with Garamond or Caslon, something like that. Over. What's your
go-to font?
Well, let's see. It kind of changes. Right now, I'm into something called for a serif font, which is, you know, what has the little feet and the what do you want to say? Well, I'll just show you the fonts. Okay, so this is Century School Book. It's kind of like, and it's an older font, and it was something that was originally created for like children's books, because it's very open and easy to read, and I just like the look of it right now. I feel like it's in style. And then the sans serif font that I'm using a lot is this one. It's called GT America, and that's a newer font, but it's based on older fonts like Helvetica, or what you would call those are called like grotesque fonts, and like or Gothic. So there's like trade Gothic, and they're very similar. But I mean, the great thing about something like this is it has all these different weights to it, right? So this is the compressed version, and then, you know, that's the regular version, and then, you know, there's bold, you know, version, medium weight version. So it's super versatile, and these two fonts work well together. I mean, that's the other thing about, you know, typefaces. You have to figure out what works together. In terms of their forms, so it's complicated. There's a book that I have. Let's see, that's a good one to read. I mean, there's a lot of them, but, you know, there's this one. It's kind of a classic. It's called The Elements of Typographic Style, Robert Bringhurst, and it's kind of old, so it doesn't have all like the latest fonts in it, but it has all of your like basics. I mean, these are like all the fonts that pretty much every font is based on, you know. So that's a good one. Yeah. So you have general styles of fonts. So You can have a geometric. Let's just talk about sans serif. You could have a geometric font, and the forms are very perfectly, the O's would be perfectly round, right? And that is something like Futura. I don't know if you've seen that or whatever.
I think.
Yeah, so it's very, it's very like someone used a compass, and the S's have this perfect thing to them. And then another category of font would be humanist, and those fonts would have they wouldn't have perfect geometric shapes. They would have where it would almost look like someone maybe, not that it's a script, but they're not. They don't have these perfect shapes to them, and then the same goes for sans serif fonts, to where so for example, with this you see that there's not, so this is called a low contrast font, so there's not that much of a difference between the thicks and the thin. So take a look at this O here. It's not that much different from the thickness of the top. The thickness of the vertical is not that. And then, but if I change that to, let's say, if I have the Donny book, and so you see that now this is what you call a higher contrast font. So the widths of the top and the bottom are much more different. Do you see that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then
I never really saw that before.
You never noticed that before?
Yeah.
Well, you will now. I mean, there's differences in the height. This is called the X height, where this line is here, where the top of the lowercase letters hit. And then some fonts will have a low one, and some fonts will really have a high one. And if you're going to have type in text, you want a higher X height so you can use it smaller and it's still readable.
Do you enjoy what you do?
I do, yeah. I mean, not all the time. I mean, a lot is sort of non-creative grunt work, for lack of a better word. I mean, during revisions, or laying something out that already has a particular style, and you don't have a lot of creative input into it. It does get boring at times, but overall I'd say I enjoy the creative process, creating something from nothing, and then also really helping my clients. I mean, I enjoy, most of my clients are just awesome people, and it's fun to interact with them and then give them something that's going to help them improve their business and help them make more money. And it's also attractive at the same time, and so it is rewarding. At the end of the day, it's rewarding for me. I've actually had her help me with logos before, with this sketching process, and I'll say, hey, I'm trying to combine an A with an H, for this construction company logo or whatever, and I'll have her, she'll sit there and do it. And sometimes she, it'll spark an idea for me or whatever. Or I'll ask her, what do you think? Or I'll ask her, actually, do you see? I'll draw something. I'll say, do you see an A and an H here? And it's like, if she sees it, and she's 5, then other people will see it. Yeah. It's legible. Yeah. Yeah. My hourly rate is I'd say it's on average it's $60 an hour, and I sort of have a slightly higher rate for New York based clients, New York City based clients, and then a slightly lower rate for New Jersey based clients, just because that's what the market will allow. Yeah, so I mean, right now I'm, depending on the year, it would be somewhere between $75,000 and $100,000 a year is what I'm bringing in, and it can be quite unsteady. So it definitely helps to have a disciplined approach to money, you know, and being able to save up a little bit for the lean times, because there are definitely, especially in late summer, it's an especially slow time. So you know, so it's tough. That's the worst part about working for yourself is the ups and downs, and you know, it always seems like everything hits at once. You know, like right now I'm just like slammed, like one thing after another, you know, which is, I'm not complaining, but you know, it gets to be a lot, and then you know, in a month it'll be like crickets.